Hello, 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 everybody. Welcome to a very last minute decision to do some co-working. I've got video to make, and I have instead been playing Minecraft, and that's no good. I'd like to get this video out at some point, probably at some point before March ends, and I figured it would be fun to try to wrest the Pomodoro Supremacy title from Cideray in V Theorem. So today we are going to be going on the grind and getting some stuff done. So let's just first start off by saying hi to everyone. Hi James, hi Dreamless Sleep, welcome. Hi Cyrex and Lettuce Bird. Hello Pedro and Toji. Hi Marlon and Gluon. Yeah, that's what we're on to today. So without further ado, I have some video to edit. Let's all lock in. Let's go play that lo-fi music and get started. Let me know if the music is too loud or too quiet. Yeah, let's just get this started. Cool, all right, timer's good. I'm going to mute my mic and get to work. All right, looks like we are back from our working session. How are all of you all? So what did I get done in that break time? Well, I think I have most of the first 2.5 minutes done. You can see here as I'm expanding the timeline, I've been filling things in with certain parts, but none of the stuff was actually like complete, and now I think we have a pretty complete first 2.5 minutes. Before I get too carried away yapping, let me go ahead and reset the timer so that we can... Oh god, why does it do this? Where it works exactly one time and then it just doesn't feel like working anymore. Hello? Let me try just adding it back. That's so bizarre. Give me a second, chat, while I try and address this stupid timer app. But yeah, I hope you all had a good work session. I was pretty productive. I see some things in chat that I want to talk about because I think they're interesting. But I really would like for this stupid clock to work. Not clockwork, but rather my clock. And that's not working either. That's so bizarre. That's so bizarre how the timer will just work exactly one time. That's crazy. This happened before as well, but I thought that I had fixed it, and that doesn't appear to be true. That's really a bummer. That is a bummer. But yeah, I guess while I'm screwing around with this, I did see something that I wanted that I thought was kind of fun. Just hearing about Clockwork kind of geek out about transcription made me really want to ask chat kind of if you could dissect what makes something interesting to you. I think that's also something worth thinking about, because on the face of it, Clockwork and I are both biologists, but I think we find very different things to be interesting, and I think that's really cool. And I have my hypothesis as to why we have differential enjoyment of certain topics. Oh my goodness, this is so crazy that I can't get this to work. But yeah, I want to hear chat. What makes something interesting to you? I think it would be interesting to hear. Yeah. No timer, we're free. uh, yeah. Yeah, unfortunately, I still see the timer on my end. It's just such a bummer that it's not working. What if I remove the timer entirely? And then what if I quit out of that? Then opened this. I feel like we should even, if I could like stop it beforehand. Yeah, it's just not working. That's such a bummer. This piece of crud. And now the dock won't even work. Crazy. Okay, well, we're gonna have to probably go on the honor system then if I can't get this to actually work. Reset, 15 minutes. Enter that in. Timer's still not visible for whatever reason, but I will know. I will keep myself honest, I suppose. What editing tool does Fi use? Premiere Pro, simultaneously the most and least useful video editing tool on earth, and one that breaks constantly, as you can see from my sparkly rage. Uh, yeah. Yeah, Death to Tomato Time. Yeah. I know. No, not for me. I gotta get back into it in another 14 minutes. I'd rather use Microsoft's video editor, Sony Vegas for the win. Yeah, the thing is that my institution pays for the entire Adobe suite, and there are convenient parts of it that I still like to use, but if I had to start over my channel from scratch, I would probably not want to start off with Adobe products. I like it when the Legos fit together. True. Very satisfying, very satisfying. The puzzle to understanding things is always so interesting, so satisfying. Yeah. I think that I have that for biology, but as anyone who knows me, including Toxo and Clockwork, knows, I am very against learning anything outside of my field of interest, which is why, like, for me, what's interesting, and I've said this multiple times before, is just the narrative. You know, I like stories, and there's no story when it comes to watching a YouTube tutorial. I know. That, like, there's tinkering, and tinkering can be fun, but I think when there is an endpoint that I want to reach, it gets kind of anxiety inducing. Like, I am tinkering in order to learn so that I may implement so that I may actually do something with it. Whereas, like, tinkering in a video game is different because the stakes are so low, but like making a video, the stakes are a lot higher. It's like, this is my autistic passion. And tinkering and not getting anywhere is like a very frustrating feeling, which is why I would not be a good engineer, by the way. Yeah. So I'm catching up on chat now. What makes something interesting? When it somehow can relate to my work or with my sapient bacteria. On a more serious note, I'm not sure I can put it into words. It's got to relate to my special interests. Yeah, I mean, I don't think it has to be harder than that. That, you know, there are topics that you might find interesting, and maybe that is your entry point into finding other things interesting. I love it when something makes sense, but also has a tiny piece of missing that gives you an invitation to explore a little further in a focused way. I mean, I'm the same way too, although we've chosen to focus on very different aspects of biology, which is why I want to like tease that apart in a kind of way, just because I think there's something there. I'm not entirely sure what it is, but in terms of, you know, if I had to couch it in like a professional interest, it's like getting a better understanding of the landscape of interest in general could be pretty professionally useful for me, at least, because, you know, I'm a certain way and I have a cognitive understanding that other people are different than me, right? It's a theory of mind. But I just kind of wonder what in our psyche is more pulled towards different stories. So Clockwork is quite heavily invested in molecular machinery, I think, is probably what uh, your brain goes towards, or maybe that's just where you happen to find yourself these days. But over the arc of my sort of biology life, I started interested in molecular machines and then lost interest at some point. Not like completely lost interest, but it didn't hit as hard as something like immune evasion for me personally. And I kind of wonder why that is, because on principle, like, yes, this feeling of filling in the blanks is addictive and interesting and exciting, but the topics that we choose to invest in, that I think is pretty nuanced and hard to understand. A desired ends for something helps me construct a narrative in order to understand how pieces fit together. Yeah. Just making sure that things make sense is incredibly satisfying. But I don't have that for, say, the way a refrigerator works. It's my common example of, like, I'm pretty narrow-minded, although I know that, like, I've known engineers who are more on the side of, I just want to know how everything works, whereas I don't have that. So I'm wondering what characteristics are true of people that do have that broad uh, thirst for knowledge, but also people who have a lot more narrow focus, and in the sense where it's professionally useful because uh, it is beneficial, adaptive to have broader interests than it is to have a very specialized interest, just because innovation happens at the intersection of fields. And so ideally in my classroom, I would like to promote a general sense of interest in biology, because yeah, again, that's adaptive. Like, you might think that you're only interested in cancer, but if you also happen to be interested in, say, biochemistry, it makes biochemistry easier to learn, and then you can use biochemistry in your practice of studying cancer, that kind of thing. Wait if I can explain it perfectly. There's no PDB for cell biology, whereas there's a PDB for MolBio. Like, I know how to search the PDB in UniProt, so that's how I generate understanding. But I never also had to do any super advanced research. I just read about MolBio research, and Alanine screen would have killed that interest very quickly, probably. Well, I've never had to do MolBio research. Sorry, I've never had to do an Alanine screen, so I'm not entirely sure if that really explains the difference. So are you implying that the accessibility of what you're able to find kind of geared your interests? Like, you just happen to tumble in this space, but maybe there's, I guess that's true. I guess in terms of the grand scheme, like, I've probably experienced a broader range of topics than you have, just from my personal background. And I suppose that's true that, like, given those tools, but the thing is, I don't even think it's easier to search PDB for interesting stories. Like, you've developed a very specialized set of skills that make that fun in a way, whereas, you know, I acknowledge I have PDB at my disposal as well. In fact, I use it all the time in my videos, but I actually don't know why. For, like, I would never have chosen to cover transcription, and having watched at least the beginning of your video, it is very clear that, like, it is interesting, but there's a level of interest where my desire to make a video, like, do you know, kind of get what I mean? Like, it is interesting. I do remember being interested in it, but what makes you better at covering that topic is you're able to pull out passion from the topic, whereas I don't think I could do that. Not to say, again, not to crap on the topic, it's just I am not the correct artist for that story, and I think I want to understand why I'm not the correct artist for that story. I think that's kind of where my head is at there. Yeah. Sorry, my chat is lagging on my end. Not to digress, but the way refrigerators work is genuinely fascinating. I've read about it a couple of times, but for example, there's no bone in my body that wants to make a video about how refrigerators work, even if I knew how it worked perfectly. That's kind of, you know, I guess broadly it's like, what about us, or what about your artistic view on your specialty makes certain video topics important enough to cover, confident enough to cover, enjoyable enough to cover? Because again, I acknowledge that there's a lot of interesting things out there, but even me choosing topics for Phi the Neutrophil. I'm not entirely 100%. I'm not 100% aware of why I choose to cover the things I do, and I think that's interesting. Dude, the chat lag is like insane right now. Maybe it's because I'm running a couple of different things. How's my computer doing? Yeah, not overheating. It's just struggling right now. The only reason I have the passion is because I know all the cool oncology and immunology stories I'll be able to tell once I slog through a full transcription video. That's true. That's also something that I've thought about in terms of the fact that like my learning did not stop after I left graduate school. That like, yeah, again, I feel like being unencumbered from the life of an actual researcher, I'm much more free to read so much more. And I always wanted to take an immunology class, but I was actually too afraid to in undergraduate because it was it was going to ruin my GPA for medical school, which is so cynical, but like I don't know, there's a lot of cynicism in the process of acquiring a medical profession, right? You have to play around your GPA if you want your highest grade. And so I sympathize with my pre-med students when they all want to grub for numbers. I sympathize with them, but I want to encourage, them to open up a perspective, even though I didn't. So like Phi the Neutrophil is like a way for me to take that immunology class, but instead of getting taught by a teacher, I kind of have to teach myself, which is kind of crazy. Um, yeah. You hated making the video, the transcription video? What I mean, I guess the context of how long you spent on it, I'd probably hate making a 40-minute video too. Our learning never stops. Yeah, absolutely. And I feel happier to be reading now that there aren't as many stakes, right? In graduate school, it's like I need to read so that I can get a job, so that I can be an expert in my field. But now it's like I can read so that I can share what I've learned, and that is so much nicer of a motivation than reading for um for reading for profession, right? For actually taking action on what you've read is a lot more terrifying than just reading something and being like, hey, I want to share something cool that I've learned. I got a 68 in Orgo 1, OChem, and was so afraid of taking more advanced classes, thinking I would be unemployable with a trash GPA. Yeah, that was my thought too. Although if I had the wisdom that I have now, I think I would have been, if I could tell my younger self to just chill with the GPA thing. Well, I mean that's not really fair because my younger self wanted to be a doctor, so there wasn't really going to be any chill with regards to worrying about numbers on the report card. But I think that the second I decided to not be a medical doctor, I should have gone crazy with taking cool classes like immunology. I should have just yeah, because it's kind of hard to teach yourself advanced material, right? Like if you are still in school, take advantage of that because once you start having to teach yourself, there's always this constant anxiety that you're not getting it right. Like this flu video has been the hardest video to research so far because I just never felt comfortable. I never felt like I read enough. I still don't think I've read enough, but at some point I just had to call it because otherwise this video wouldn't get done for another 6 months. And so if you are still in school learning from somebody, just take full advantage of that situation and learn as broadly as you possibly can. Assuming you want to go to graduate school, I mean that there like I have to acknowledge it's not the right strategy for every undergraduate out there. Like if you don't want to have higher education outside of undergrad, then it makes sense to specialize. But if you do want to do like postgraduate research, masters or PhD, it absolutely pays off to read broadly and to take broad classes and to challenge yourself in undergraduate because at least in the US, the GPA is like kind of important but not super important. Definitely want a GPA that's high, but it's not as competitive as medical school in terms of GPA. Like you're allowed to make more mistakes studying to get into a graduate program than you are for medicine, and you should take full advantage of that because once you start assembling your various tools, the world becomes a lot more fun to explore. I guess I'll put it that way. the aspect of learning to teach yourself is a non-trivial aspect of uni level. Yeah, I mentioned that on my last stream, but for those of you who haven't heard, the reason why gifted kids get destroyed in undergraduate is because they're used to repeating things that their teachers told them. And in university, your teachers don't tell you everything because they can't, because the material is too complicated to fit in 2 1-hour lectures per week. So actually figuring out how to teach yourself is like such a big important skill. Watch the full video and you can pinpoint the exact moment where my editorial process imploded and I could just not render splicing with any more clarity. Yeah, I mean, I haven't gotten to the splicing part of the video, but having addressed splicing in my own Prion video, it is hard. And I cartooned the absolute crap out of it just to get the idea across. But I actually don't know mechanically how splicing works off the top of my head. I must have learned it at some point, so I am excited to get to that part of the video for a refresher. I like the process of research. Doesn't matter what I'm researching. I'm terrified of committing to specialization. I think it might. I don't know at what stage of your career you are in, but I think, you know, going to faculty talks, eventually you'll be so taken by a particular problem that it might feel like you have no choice but to tackle that issue. It happened for me in graduate school where I had this like emotional moment of like, oh crap, like I see the alternatives and I don't want to study anything else. But I'm also, I think, above average with regards to committing myself to passions, put it that way. Sucks that challenging yourself is discouraged under the GPA framework. Yeah, we've had a lot of conversations amongst us higher ed teaching folks, and there's just like not a great alternative, at least not one that we could come up with. You know, and maybe that's our fault, like a weakness in our own conceptualization, our own creativity. But we've had like multiple workshops in my teaching groups trying to think of a radical new education system that moved past GPA that still maintained rigor. And I think where things fall apart is students are in it for different reasons, and so you cannot have a system by which applies and caters to every student. For example, you know, a GPA-less educational system would benefit greatly students who are already self-motivated, who want to take those chances. But for students who just want the education for work, for a job, you know, there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, that is the economic reality of, you know, a lot of people, where education is a means to an end. And for them, you don't want them to have unrestricted, you know, you don't want them to not be able to prove to an employer their worth, their concrete worth, whereas like a GPA-less system would be not concrete worth, but rather abstract worth. And it's a lot harder to sell. There's also just so much flu research. How on earth can you focus enough to find a video angle? I thought I had my angle, and then I kept reading, and then I kept on having to redo my script. I think in terms of my framework, I'm really trying to focus on some proteins. You know, one of the proteins Clockwork will actually be helping me with showing. Because in terms of like the epidemiology of the flu, that I was like, oh my gosh, there's absolutely no way I can tackle any of that, because it's mind-bogglingly complicated. When I was in high school, I heard that flu researchers were amongst the smartest scientists, and like doing research for the flu for this video, I'm like, I believe it, man. There's too much to keep track of. And so focusing on the protein story is the angle that I took, just because I could not tell you if bird flu is something to be worried about. Even the CDC, you know, pre-February, if you know, you know, even the CDC of that time was not concerned about bird flu yet. And so to me at the time, given what I had known, that felt really scary, because, you know, we've been hearing about bird flu being this apocalypse and waiting. After I did research, like relatively deep research into the epidemiology of the bird flu, I'm mixed. I'm more optimistic that we'll be okay, but not completely so. But in terms of, don't take it from me, right? Health professionals, health community professionals, your local state governments, which care about disease and stuff, those are probably more they're probably more educated on the topic than I would be, of course. But what I'll say is that, like, right now it's not all doom and gloom, although it might be in the future. We'll just have to see. But I just wanted to put it out there. Yeah. Yeah. You got it right. Cell bio is, it's fascinating. The virology is wild. The molecular biology is incredible. The epidemiology is, there's just no way for me to handle that. Okay, so we've hit the next time point. So we will begin the next work session. I can't believe I can't have the stupid timer on screen, but I will put mine here. So it's 2:50 p.m. And then we will be back with chatting at 3:35-ish. All right, see you there. Have fun working. Ding, ding, ding. All right, we are back. Let me set the chatting timer. Oh, how is everyone doing? You all hanging in there? Getting some good work done? I've reached the point in the video where I'm beginning to like the video again, whereas I think the beginning is a little rough, and I might want to redo it. But, it's been good going back and revisiting this video since I've taken my Minecraft break. Yeah. Tomato said ding. Correct. Yes. One of the things that I was thinking about, this has nothing to do with biology or nothing to do with anything, but just some stuff that I've been stewing in my head is the idea of social deduction games, which is again a complete left pivot, but I had one of these topics in my back pocket in case I ever needed to pull something out. And the idea of, I don't know if y'all are familiar with games like One Night Ultimate Werewolf or Mafia and the like, but I actually really used to be quite good at them right up until the point of leaving undergraduate, in which case afterwards it had become the most stressful thing to have ever happened to me. But before graduate school, it was quite fun, and I don't really know fully. I don't fully understand why that is for myself personally. I was thinking about this because he's always about Among Us, and now that we're all streaming, the idea of floating a V Theorem Among Us stream is out there. And maybe I'm hedging by saying that I would be a terrible Among Us player. Although everyone assures me that they're also terrible. We do have 2 psychologists in V Theorem, and I think they're full of it. So I'm wondering if you've had experience playing these social deduction games. What do you think of them? Do you love them? Do you hate them? I'm tired. You could do it, Toxo. I can't wait to see what you've done so far. Be very fun to see. Got about 350 words in the section writing. That's huge, honestly. 350 is a lot to have done in 45 minutes, considering like an NSF grant for graduate students just 500. So you can communicate a whole ass research project in 500 words. So 350 is pretty huge. Halfway through setting up a LinkedIn. That's fun. In a way where I've recently been introduced to a lovely subreddit called LinkedIn Lunatics. And that's been a lot of fun to go down. Which cell is secretly producing viral proteins? Well, as you can tell from this blurred screenshot, and the context clues of it being the flu virus, I'll say that this is the epithelium of the lung. I've played a lot of Suma, but was never good at it. That one is... I don't know which one that is. Yeah. Is that one of the social deduction games? Would the psychologist get a debuff? I sure hope so. I would love for them to get some kind of talking debuff. Professional brain people they are. Literally never played a single round of Among Us. Trend completely passed me by. I went from like being a very comfortable liar in these games to all of a sudden growing a conscience somehow. Like as soon as I hit graduate school, I just lost my ability to lie comfortably. And I have some hypotheses as to why, but and this is not hedging like, oh, that's exactly what a good liar would say. I think legit, like you can ask Toxo. I actively sit out social deduction games if they ever come out at like friend hangouts. I don't know, bad for my blood pressure. I don't like social deduction games personally. My friend loves them. The Salem games specifically, I've never really heard of them. I might have to look into them. Setting up my new purse I thrifted right now. That's awesome. Are you showing your MHC1 protein in terms of flagging whether or not I am an imposter? We'll just have to see if I can evade that when playing Among Us. Something Suma gonads. Thank you for using the biological term, Candy. I'm not gonna lie, I got completely distracted by translating cancer into Mayan languages. What did you find? That sounds interesting. Your brain finished myelinating and you lost all your lying buffs. I think it's because I had grown up with the same group of people for so long, like our school networks transitioning from elementary to middle to high to university was all like one big pipeline. And I think that I had been very comfortable lying because I had downloaded enough information about the people I was playing with to know how to get away with lying, which sounds completely psychopathic, but I mean, it's just a sign that I'm like good enough friends with them to know their tells, but also to know what they would buy. And I think the first social deduction game I had played post undergraduate, because in graduate school, it was the first time I was entering a school environment where I didn't know anybody. Like I had been very fortunate for so long in my life to only go to schools where I knew a good chunk of the people there. And so graduate school was a real like adult moment where for the first time I'm like, oh gosh, I need to like do the whole hello my name is bit again. And playing with people that you don't know every single thing about is very very stressful. It turns out that like lying and feeling confident that you'll get away with a lie is chill, but lying and not feeling confident that you'll get away with a lie is horrible. It's horrifying. It's so scary, so stressful. But the other problem with social deduction games, and not including Among Us, because Among Us actually has this solved, is that once you lose, you just stop playing. And I've always felt like that has been a huge flaw in a lot of game design. Like One Night Ultimate Werewolf also kind of solves that in the sense where there's only one round, but for something like Mafia, for example, as soon as you're axed, you just have nothing to do for the rest of the time, and that's not fun. I don't think that's good game design. Among Us at least has the in-game chat, like the ghost chat, which is kind of fun. So at least that part is nice, but I still would be very bad at trying to get away with the lies. I also find that kind of style of game can be very frustrating in other games as well. Like I love to crap on Catan, Settlers of Catan, not being a social deduction game, but being a resource management kind of game. On the face of it, I would really enjoy it, but if you get off to a rough start, you just end up losing for 40 minutes, and that's not really fun. You're not really getting to play the game if you roll poorly in that game, which is why I think like the better version of Settlers of Catan is just Civilization 6, where you're basically playing Catan, except the way that multiplayer Civ 6 works, if you're interested in multiplayer, is that your victory, your win condition is not necessarily to be number one in every game, but to be the most consistent. So if you rank second in a game, you get a certain amount of elo, right? And your goal is not to win every single game, but to finish the season with the highest elo. And I think that's a lot more fun because then playing for second becomes a viable strategy versus Catan, where, if you don't win, you just lose. And I mean, is that the point of games? Sure, but I think that it's a lot more fun to be playing a game where you think you can win the entire time, or at least you think you can have a respectable showing at the end of the day, right? Because Catan is just so brutal if you get bad RNG at the beginning. In other news, the German citric acid cycle, I'm not going to attempt to pronounce that, can be translated as cancer cycle. That's interesting. I wonder why. Does Space Station 13 count as a social deception game? I actually don't know what Space Station 13 is. On a vaguely related note, I wonder if biowarfare researchers on opposing sides ever had a chance to talk and not be allowed to say anything. Yeah, I wonder that too. I'm sure that is the case, right? Because there's, confidentiality rules with regards to national security, so I wouldn't be surprised if that came into play. Yeah, I guess I've been thinking a lot about game design as well, just because I've been getting back into playing Slay the Spire, which is an endless amount of fun for me. I don't know if chat if you've had the chance to play. I know I streamed it like way earlier, back when I thought I was going to be like a hybrid VTuber, streaming games and doing my thing. But it turns out I think that I'm best suited to just talking about biology, and I'll leave the gaming to people who have enough parallel processing to actually game and be entertaining. And for those of you who attended my last stream, you'd already know kind of what my thoughts are about video game streaming content. Tough to make entertaining, I'd say. Very tough, very tough. Not easy at all. People who crap on streamers for, having a job where you're just talking to a microphone don't actually know how difficult it is to make money off of that kind of thing. Like, yes, it's easy to talk into a microphone. It's not actually, I shouldn't even say that. It's not that easy to talk into a microphone, but it's even harder to talk into a microphone and have it be good enough that people want to give you money or support you in that kind of way. So I've always found the argument that like, oh, streamers, they're lazy and they don't do anything. But the thing is that if they're talented enough, if they have the practice, right? If they're practiced enough where they can just turn on a microphone and be entertaining, then I think they should be rewarded too, right? Like, sure, eventually, after a certain size, streamers who are naturally charismatic or who have practiced enough to be charismatic can make a living just by turning on a microphone and talking. But that doesn't mean they didn't work hard for it, right? They still had to train to the point where they can talk and have it be good enough that people want to listen. And I think that's underappreciated with regards to how people perceive streamers. Space Station 13 is a game where a bunch of players are on a space station completing tasks with certain traders who do various antagonistic things, but it focuses a lot on mechanical simulation. You can get lost for hours just tinkering in atmospherics. Okay. Post or pre Among Us? I wonder what that game actually looks like. Got a dip for dad mode. Hope everyone has a solid, productive evening. Thanks for dropping by, Clockwork. And good luck with dad mode. Yeah. Do you think in the future are cat girls theoretically possible to genetically engineer, barring the ethics and that stuff, for like from a dev bio point of view? So the thing about that is cats themselves, I guess this little teaser for the molecular biology stream, are pretty hard to study genetically. So in terms of like theoretically possible, I mean, given the vast space of biology, it's really hard to say anything is impossible in biology, right? Like it's easy to say that cat girls are possible because biology is so strong, right? Like so incredibly powerful with regards to what you can engineer. If it's practical to see in our lifetime, again, yeah, I appreciate the ethics part. Whether it's possible in our lifetime, it's pretty hard to say. I mean, with advances in AI, maybe, because I think there is a fundamental theoretical limit for how much we can, in our human brains, understand about how mammalian organs are developed, in a way. Like engineering a different organism into the human body plan is like a next level ask. Whereas, like, okay, I guess it depends on the approach, right? Because the way that I'm thinking of is theoretically engineering embryos to become cat girls as opposed to grafting cat ears, which I think if you want to take that approach, that's actually, I think, theoretically quite possible. Whether or not those grafted ears do anything, that's not an issue. But if you want to think practically about what a cat girl is fundamentally, if you want that cat girl to have two sets of functional ears, right, human ears and also cat girl ears, as many cat girls do have, then you have to hook up new wiring from that extra pair of ears to the brain in a specific location, right? So those ears are typically located somewhere around the skull. And there's not really a super easy way to get that done unless you are able to genetically engineer unique wiring, which you might. But again, doing it at the embryo level, I think is kind of crazy because you'd have to you would have to know how every single detail works in dev bio as opposed to just grafting ears, which, I mean, I don't think that that's crazy. Free Among Us is written in the old Mud engine Beyond. Ooh, released in 2003. That sounds cool. That sounds cool. The outermost part of the ear is pretty simple, mostly cartilage. I'm more thinking about like hooking up to the or auditory. What are they called? The no, olfactory is smell. Yeah, auditory cortex. That I think is going to be quite hard. Yeah. So as long as you maintain the ear canal, yeah. But the problem is that cat girls are typically shown with two sets of ears, so that can be quite difficult. Yeah, getting the vertical ear canal is tricky. Yeah, exactly. I don't think you'd need a secondary cochlea. I don't think you would need one either, but you would have to be able to hook up the two, right? Again, from the embryo point of view, like knowing everything we know about Hox genes and the body plan, et cetera, to be able to do that would be hard, but grafting and surgery, I think we're definitely almost for certain closer to being able to graft cat ears onto a human than we are to, you know, genuinely modify the embryo to naturally give rise to cat ears. Although that is my take at least. Can't they just be cosmetic? Yeah, that's why I think that it depends on what your definition of cat girl actually is, right? If it's a girl with cat ears, that's, you know, you can be quite liberal, I guess, with how you interpret that. But a true bona fide fantasy kind of half cat, half human, that's a lot harder. And again, the genetics of cats is actually a huge pain. Cats, I mean, you can even see this is a teaser, but this is not something that I think is very spoilery, but two cats with completely different fur coats can give birth to a cat that looks nothing like either parent. It just goes to show how complicated cat genetics can be. Although that might be specifically for the coat, but I think, like, I'm not aware of any genetic model of cats. Cats have been historically used as animals to study the visual cortex, but I think that they have been pretty notoriously difficult to genetically modify. So by not having an easy system for genetic modification, that could also make understanding how the cat develops quite difficult. I've heard that scientists were able to get flies to grow legs out of their heads. Yeah. That's the Hox gene story. In fact, you can actually see a bit of that in the Machamp short that I did talking about Hox genes and duplicated body segments. Yeah, flies can be really easily manipulated genetically. But it's a little more complicated than that because flies are segmented and their body plan is relatively simple. Whereas for, you know, for humans, we're also segmented, right? But then those segments become different things, and that can be kind of difficult to manage. Because like the program that like the top, so I'm making this up because I'm not like a dev bio person, but like the idea would be that above the topmost segment are the tissue that becomes the head. Like it gets very messy because I think neural tissue is see, I don't know, right? Like the tissue that becomes the neurons, that becomes the brain. I don't necessarily know if that's the same layer that forms the skull, and so like being able to place where you would have to put ears on is just, it's just messy, right? And also because flies are segmented, it's like a series of if then statements, whereas the skull, I don't think the skull develops in a segmented fashion. But I have nowhere near enough expertise to know that for a fact. Because if you can just take a segment and ask that segment to grow a leg, then that's how you do that Drosophila manipulation, right? That thorax segment, all that programming that says become a thorax, you just ask that to become legs instead or whatever. And you know, Drosophila in that way are very plug and play, but mammals are a lot trickier, I think. Yeah. What about the tail? The tail actually is probably more possible given what I know about dev bio, right? Because the tail, there's like the somebody with medical knowledge can correct me, but there's like the coccyx, right? There's a tail bone that has become somewhat redundant in humans, And I think it's probably easier to grow that tail than it would be to grow ears on top of the skull, just knowing how the body hooks up with one another, right? So asking that bottommost segment, the tailbone segment, asking that, like plugging in the program to grow a tail there, to me sounds more doable than asking the skull to produce ears. That I think would be my guess. That would be my approach. Dogs can also have offspring of different coats than their parents, and that's well understood. I don't think that's necessarily a particularly complex topic. Hierarchy of dominant and recessive genes. Yeah, maybe. I haven't done the deep dive into the cat literature quite yet. Although when I did look it up, it did not seem to be just dominant recessive. I think there was also epistasis involved, which makes it really a headache. But I'll know for certain when I end up prepping for that cat stream, and maybe we can revisit the cat girl idea back then. Coccyx is the tailbone. Yeah, nice. So I remember something about physiology, I suppose. So maybe there's some remnant that could be reactivated. Yeah, I mean, we are primates, right? So presumably, and I don't know because not a human expert, but presumably there's some amount of that primate DNA from back when we were monkeys, right? Well, cousins with monkeys, right? So I don't know that there's some large swath of DNA that's been deactivated or mutated beyond function, but like the segment by which the tail comes out of could potentially be the same segment that gives rise to that coccyx, and that could theoretically be engineered to produce a real tail. I think. Again, a lot of asterisks here. I think even if you understood cat genetics very well, you can't just easily use that to convince largely human DNA to produce two pairs of ears. It seems like quite a unique problem. Yeah, I'm thinking about it from like a bioengineering perspective, right? Like if we were to draw equivalence with Drosophila, because for Drosophila, you can replace the program at the segment that determines antennae formation, and you can swap that with the program that says grow a leg instead. Drosophila being very plug and play. Underlying human biology is a very similar plug and play aspect, but it's not as plug and play, right? It's a lot more complicated than a segmented insect, because those are pretty straightforward. The human segments come from the stuff that eventually becomes their spine. It's just there's so much more going on in terms of after those segments are determined that it's hard to imagine how to make that happen organically. I don't know if gene edits on their own can change the body plan once morphogenesis is complete. Yeah, that's why like thinking about the cat girl problem is like, do you want to do it from the embryo, like from like the chromosomes of the organism, or do you want to do it just by grafting or some other post fertilization manipulation? And I don't really know what the right answer there would be, but it is kind of fun to think about as like a test for understanding. Certainly I might revisit the cat girl problem on a stream, but I'd have to do it after I review mammalian development for sure. Okay, and now we are heading into our last work session, our last 45-minute session, and then we will call it a co-working stream. So I will see you all in 45 minutes. All right, let's finish up this work, y'all. All right. We are back from our final work session. Welcome back, y'all. Hope the work has been going well. It certainly has for me. I'm about 7.5 minutes out of this 24-minute video. Most of that video being done already, although I'm missing a couple of in-betweens here and there. Yeah, it's been pretty good on my end. How's it going on yours? What have y'all been up to in this last work session? I'll take a little bit of time to read on chat for a bit. Yeah. Anyone good with plants? Well, our very own Nepenthes VT would probably be the person to go to there. I don't know if they're streaming today, but they might be. They usually have pretty late hours though, in terms of, you know, in relationship to EST. So if you're a night owl and on the East Coast, then you might be able to catch one of Nep's streams. I did no work. I made tomorrow's lunch. That is productive, right? You are preparing the calories that your brain will be using up tomorrow. That is working away. What'd you make for lunch? I find the ritual of making food to be not relaxing in a way, because there is always the associated cleanup, which Doxo helps out with, which is very nice because it has allowed me to do the more fun part of cooking, which is the actual cooking, as opposed to the less fun part of cooking, which is the cleaning up. But I find that it's such an important skill to have, just as someone who was not preparing food for themselves for a good chunk of college. And I find it to be almost game-like in a way, where it starts off being quite hard to cook, especially for a single person. But over time, you do pick up your own tips and tricks. And that's actually something that I think is really satisfying about watching Ethan Chabowski's channel, because he knows this, that a lot of recipe content online is pretty hard to follow because it's not made for long-term skill building. It's more like, individual recipes, they're not bad. It's just they're not meant to teach you how to cook in the long term. And so Ethan's series on how to cultivate a long vision of cooking is nice. And it's something that you don't really learn other than through your own trials and tribulations. I had grown up with parents who, Perkinji is writing, speaking of food. I'd grown up with parents who cooked almost every day, but they had done it for their entire lives. And so being born in this age of convenience, it's been harder to understand how they can do it. And every year that passes, I am more and more amazed that they were able to do so. But it does get easier over time. I often think of that quote from BoJack. I'm not going to get it right exactly, but the quote where the baboon is like, it's hard, but I can't remember it. Whatever, it gets easier every day, but you got to do it every day, something like that. And that I think, I don't know if I've ranted about this before, but I think the disservice that food influencers have done to the public is the false impression that every meal has to be gorgeous and perfect. Because for some people who are inclined to perfectionism, that can be pretty harmful. Food can just be food. Food can just be whatever, and that's fine. It doesn't have to be dressed up all fancy. It can just be food, and as long as it fulfills your daily requirement for nutrition, then and it's edible, that I think there should be more content that's focused on that versus stuff that is picturesque, beautiful, delicious looking, just sustainable food that you can, you can step one foot over the other. That I think would go pretty hard. And there are channels like that out there. I just think that the more eye-catching stuff is the stuff that typically gets more press. And we had talked about clickbait earlier, and I don't want to make it seem like, there's no point to this. There is. It's just there's an interesting tension between clickbait attractive thumbnail, delicious looking food, and the tension between plating up food that looks delicious and the reality that the home cook can achieve. And I think that there's always going to be that tension because no one's going to want to click on a video where the food looks like crap, right? And so I think that's an interesting little bit of nuance with regards to making food content online. For reference, my favorite food channel is Future Canoe. Very unpretentious kind of food, and when it is pretentious, it is done in a non-pretentious way. I learned about an important metaphor in stem cell differentiation that goes into a bit more detail that I desire, known as the Waddington landscape. I think I've heard of that one where there are local minimum that cells can get caught into, and if they're in those local minimum, then they'll differentiate into something. If they're knocked out of their local minimum, then they'll differentiate into something else. It's a very intuitive model for cell fate, even if it isn't tremendously molecularly detailed. It's good enough for imagining how that happens. Egg salad sandwich, 2 oranges, and a handful of cashews. That sounds really good and really healthy. Oranges are so good. They are so portable and no fuss, and I love them, and that's awesome. I'm working on a script for a YouTube video, and I basically just erased and retyped the same paragraph over and over again. I understand that pain. The octopus lady. I very much understand what it's like to just junk a whole bunch of stuff. Yeah. What are you working on, Octopus Lady? I'm curious to know. Also, the check mark. Go check out the Octopus Lady. Very, very cool, it looks like. It looks like we're not exactly in the same field. It looks like the Octopus Lady does a lot more about animals, which looks pretty interesting. Animals are too complicated for me. I prefer to stay in the realm of cells. But that's so cool. So cool. I'm checking out your channel right now. Go check out the Octopus Lady. Very, very neat. There's one cooking channel which produces like a bajillion recipes that are some variation of leeks, noodles, chili oil, broccoli, and a nice sauce mix, which those ingredients are hard to go wrong with. Yeah. I think seeing the commonalities between different recipes and accumulating a list of comfort go-tos has helped a lot with reducing my own food waste. I think there was an Ethan Chbosky video that had said that one of the most common barriers to entry in cooking is that it's hard to shop. That it's not the cooking itself that's hard, but the planning around it. And I'm the kind of gamer. I'm the kind of gamer that really likes to plan around resource management. As I said, Civ 6, love Civ 6. I like the idea of Catan and all these games where it's about managing resources. And so food is just another one of these food, like resource management type games that I like to play. Or at least I like to think of them like games so that they become less intolerable, I should say. Yeah, again, it gets easier, but you have to do it every day. Yeah, I always start off with simple things with little complexity. Understanding the process of cooking is a learning curve itself, and it's fun. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a lab procedure that at the end of the day you get to eat, and there's nothing wrong with that. We've actually been talking to Toxo a bit about the difference between baking and cooking, and I feel that like it's easier, it's less complex to cook, but the potential for messing things up is quite high. Whereas if you follow the instructions for baking, there's a minimum amount of goodness, unless you burn it, of course. If you burn anything, it becomes terrible. But that goes for the same with cooking, right? But I think that there's interesting learning curves that are different in baking and cooking, because Toxo bakes a lot and I cook a lot. And I think that like there's a minimum good cookie, and then the ceiling is also quite high, but like screwing up cooking can be pretty awful, and I've done a number of those, just like almost inedible level of cooking. Understanding the balance between sugar and salt is really important, because I've had too many meals that have had too much sugar in them, and it ended up being so disgusting. It really sucks to waste food like that. But I do think that it is easier to get your foot in the door with baking than it is for cooking. Mm, yeah, I wonder what chat thinks of that. I think it's something I've been thinking about recently. I almost finished listening to the immunology lecture on cancers associated and not associated with viruses. Ooh, that sounds like fun, and something that I will eventually cover when I talk about HPV, probably in the next charity stream beginning of next year. Yeah, cancers associated with viruses, nightmare fuel. But in the case of HPV, very easily preventable, right? Get your vaccines. Yeah. Octolady rules. I love the video on diatom silicate skeletons, alien ocean. Okay, I'm gonna subscribe right now and go ahead and check more of this content out. Very cool to see other biology content creators in the space. And I do have to say, I'm not casting dispersions on you, Octopus Lady, but like I have a weird competitive mindset where like I don't want to watch other biology content creators because I'm afraid that we might overlap too much, but it doesn't appear like we overlap at all. So I'm very excited to get into some of these critters. It's also too complicated for me. I truly admire your ability to understand all that microbiology stuff. I think that's crazy because the difference between animals, I think, is greater than the difference between cells, right? I think for cells, once you are acquainted with the cell playbook, right? Because I think the complexity arrives at the organism/tissue level, and then when you're all just talking about cells, they are quite different from one another, but they all work the same basic way through the central dogma. Whereas, like, I can barely wrap my head around the differences between animals. It seems very complex. But this goes back to a conversation that I often have with my fellow V-Theorem members that, like, we prefer ambiguity and complexity at different levels because at the cellular level, I think there's less ambiguity, which makes it more nuts and boltsy, but the nuts and bolts make sense. When you abstract to things like psychology, things get a lot messier, not any less rigorous scientifically, but like you have to be a lot more comfortable with ambiguity and not knowing all the answers. And for me, it's more comfortable to be in a field where there are a lot of answers known. Put it that way. I don't want to give away too much, but my next video involves a bivalve and organized crime. Like someone almost got their legs broken because of this bivalve. Ooh, I wonder what that might be. I wonder if we have any overlap, Octopus Lady. If you are familiar with some of the more common model organisms that are commonly used for cell molecular biology. I'm trying to think. I'm going to go through your video catalog right now and see if there are any interesting overlaps that we might have in our content. Oh, zebrafish. That's a big one, actually. How much do you know about zebrafish, Octopus Lady? Because that, I think, is like what I'm seeing is a lot of marine biology, and where we might overlap is zebrafish. So I'm very, very curious how much you've gone into there, into the biology of zebrafish. Getting a sense for how much time in the heat, how much sugar or salt you can get away with before it turns inevitable. Yeah, and that's a learning curve, and you get punished for it quite repeatedly until you get a natural sense for things. Because in terms of the number of meals that my parents have prepared that are inedible, my entire life, I don't think I've ever had a meal that they've cooked that was inedible. Whereas, me cooking, a couple of years ago, there were numerous. Put it that way. I'm the exact same way. I can watch your stuff because you don't talk about fish, but if you start talking about fish, I'd have to unsubscribe. Oh, okay. Well, I mean, the thing is that there's opportunity for collaboration if we shake hands on zebrafish. Zebrafish was an organism I learned a lot about in graduate school, but I actually have no good memory of it. But it is an extremely important organism for our understanding of how species develop, and I would actually love to get back into that. I know literally nothing about zebrafish. Oh, interesting, interesting. That could be cool if you wanted to work together. Of course, no pressure. It's just cool seeing another biologist. I love doing it, doing collaborations with people because I'm so specialized that really the only person I would say is doing the same topics as me is Clockwork, but even we cover it in completely different ways. And taking a look at other creators and being like, what's our midpoint is very, very interesting. And so I think the midpoint between the Octopus Lady and Phyto Neutrophil is zebrafish asterisk. You might know a lot more about fish in general. I might know more about this weird one fish, but it'd be cool to compare what we know about marine species. Do you count frogs as being in your expertise? Because frogs are another very, very intensely studied cell molecular biology organism. Yeah. This microscopic organism has 90 times more DNA than humans. I don't know what I'm looking at. Oh, because I saw the word micro and I was like, Oh, and a video about the mantis shrimp. Yeah, I remember learning or being very obsessed with animals before I got into undergraduate because I had no idea how upper level biology had worked. And so there was a long period of time when I would just do the like National Geographic binges on YouTube to learn everything I could know about certain critters. I was actually really obsessed with the mantis shrimp as a concept because I really wanted the Pokemon Company to come up with a Pokemon that was the mantis shrimp, right? Because there's nothing cooler than a shrimp that can punch and release an air bubble that reaches the temperature of the sun, right? Like that just seems really cool. And I think eventually Pokemon Company did release something like a mantis shrimp, but I wanted it to be like part water type, part fire type. I think that would have been really cool. From taxonomy lens, humans could count as fish or basically all land animals. Yeah, I mean, we had taken a look at One Zoom from before where you can actually see how everything relates to one another. And we're just worms in another life. We're all worms in another life. This channel is really cool. Oh my gosh, you have a video about pufferfish. Oh, okay. Okay, so deep pull. Deep in my brain from when I was a kid. I had like a 5th grade book report that I did on tetrodotoxin, which is the poison that the pufferfish makes. And so I was obsessed with pufferfish for quite some time because of how morbid the tetrodotoxin actually is, right? A poison that blocks your sodium channels, prevents your neurons from firing. And I actually got to work with tetrodotoxin as a graduate student. I told the story before, but my advisor used to say we have enough neurotoxin in our mini fridge to kill the entirety of the town that we were doing research in, which I didn't bother to check the math, but given how little TTX you need to actually kill a person, that seemed true to me. And so I'm not in any way, shape, or form an expert on pufferfish themselves, but I am obsessed with the toxins that they make. A very useful tool, actually. If you want to shut neurons up, if you want them to be as quiet as possible, you can use tetrodotoxin to study neurons when they're not firing. Yeah, I got to work with TTX. That's so cool. Yes, exactly. I was the expression being I was making number 2s in my pants the entire time that I was working with it. My heart rate, I could not calm myself. It was very, very scary to work with. And I'm surprised that you're allowed to work with TTX in a biosafety level 2 lab. But I was using it to study neurons in their quiet state when they're not yapping at each other. And so, you know, knowing that that's what that poison does is it adds a level of like, am I gonna go home and then not be able to breathe? Like, eventually I'd gotten over it. Like, unless you actually cut yourself, which you shouldn't be doing given what you're working with in the hood. But as you know, as long as it doesn't enter you, it's mostly okay. still not easy to do. Uh, yeah, so half of that. Yeah, so sorry. So Toxo is it's time for Kenji to be fed. So Toxo is going to do that, which means it's also approaching time for us to be fed. So I will just chat for a couple more minutes and then call it a work stream. It's a lot of fun. I actually think I got a lot done today. A lot of good work. 7.5 minutes into this video. And I'm probably might be doing this again tomorrow. I think it actually was more productive than if I had just sat down, because I would have been watching like YouTube videos or something in between. And yeah, as Chatter had said earlier, the experience of showing my Premiere Pro screen made it very motivating to be doing something on it. Let's put it that way. Yeah. Not to undersell any part of biology, all biology is horrendously difficult, but there's a lot of hard topics in cytology, like the cell signaling cascades from what I remember. Yeah, exactly. That I haven't done a cell biology 101 yet because it is so horrendously complicated. Whereas like biochemistry, it's like a few concepts you have to understand, and then the difficulty is applying those concepts. Cell biology, you just have to like know everything. It's like very brute force memorization for a good chunk of it, and then you get to do the fun part of cell biology. So everything is difficult in its own way, right? Because now I would say that cell biology for me personally is easier than biochemistry, because I've reached the point where biochemistry is no longer just understanding the basics of chemistry and has become, can you actually apply chemistry and do calculus and stuff like that? I'm like, yeah, I don't think I could do that. But now cell biology has become easier. It's still not tremendously easy though. The Octopus Lady, what is your background? I'm so curious, given your YouTube channel. Stepped away for a second. I think I heard you asking something about whether I do a video about frogs. That probably won't happen because I focus on animals that live in the ocean. That makes sense. That makes sense. That does make sense. As a dumb cell person, I'm just like, all wet animals are the same. Octopi actually are a model organism for studying the biology of neurons, although I think they are more like big anatomy models as opposed to cellular models. So that's something to think about. Oh my gosh, eels. Okay, eels count, right? Surely. There was a video that I had planned to do that I never got done because I'm not a physicist, about the electric eel and how to take lessons from the electric eel and apply it to engineering a Pikachu. I don't think I've done that video, at least. I was planning on it, but I just never got around to it, and I don't think that I'm physics smart enough to be able to draw a circuit diagram and like actually understand it. That might be an idea for an actual stream, because I know that there are a vast array of different experiences in my chat, a lot of smart people that are probably one of you knows about circuits and how to help me understand the I mean, I guess I could ask Z. I suppose I could ask our resident V theorem physicists to help me understand how to combine physics with biology and engineer something like a Pikachu. I think the pitch for the video is something like, why hasn't an electric land mammal evolved? Whereas it's happened a couple of times in the ocean, right? You have the electric eel, you have, I'm trying to think of other electric organisms. They're all like wet. And I wanted to really get down, like I wanted to really figure out why there isn't a dry animal that evolved an electric organ like that. Not to say that, you know, mammals aren't electric, right? Like the whole thing about the heart and the neurons and the muscles is that those are electric cells. It's just that there's no land mammal that has evolved an electric defense, as far as I can tell. Yeah. I used to be a marine biologist. I got a degree in it and everything. I used to work in zoos and aquariums, taking care of animals from sharks to corals to octopi. Wow, that's awesome. That's cool. That's so cool. You're a actual touch grass biologist, an actual touch seagrass biologist, which is so cool. Something that I'm quite jealous of because when I think biologist, I think field work, um, and working with actual samples as opposed to cells in a dish. Uh, yeah, that's awesome. That's so cool. You need way higher voltage. Yeah, in my draft of that video, I had some rudimentary math, but I wasn't confident in the math. That's why I never made the video, is I never got to the point where I was sure that my calculations were correct because I wanted to calculate what voltage you needed for a land mammal to deliver the same shock as an electric eel. Um, yeah. Dry skin has a very high resistance in addition to air being an insulator compared to to water with any amount of salt in it. Yeah, I I I had that as my initial idea, which is why I was curious. But then when it came to doing the math, I was like, I can't actually figure out how to generate a number, and then I gave up on the video. I know electrical electronic circuits, but I don't think it see the links with biology except for physical simulation of neurons slash action potential slash dendrites. There's actually a paper about the electric eel that models the conductance of electrical current through the eel's bite through a graduate student. There's a video out there where graduate students signed up to get bitten by an electric eel so they can measure the electric circuit through the graduate student's arms. Absolutely insane paper, but it gave me enough knowledge to know that you could do the math. You can, in fact, do this math. I just don't know how to do it because I'm bad at physics. So I'd actually love to really chat with Z about how maybe that should be our collab. We had talked about a biophysics collab before, but maybe our collab should be bioengineering Pikachu. That'd be really cool, actually. The echidna is possibly the only terrestrial animal to use electroreceptors to locate prey. Yeah, there's I mean, and like birds have like magnetoreception and stuff like that, but no animal actually uses its electricity as no land mammal, sorry, ever uses its electricity in a defensive fashion. And I think it'd be cool to talk to Z about how we can make that happen. Uh, oh, could you link it? I'll link it in the Discord. Actually, I don't have it on me right now, but I'll link it in the Discord. I also don't know if it's open access. You might have trouble getting it. It's a relatively recent paper, so I don't think it's Gregory 1989. Let me double check that. Is it this? It looks pretty modern. Electric eel. That probably didn't meet ethics standards. I mean, you'd be surprised. Like, if you've ever, people do not Drosophila, people do mosquito research, right? And how do you think the mosquitoes eat? How do you think mosquitoes propagate, right? They need blood. And so if you are a poor sap who works in a mosquito lab, as a graduate student, it's it's your blood that feeds the organisms. They actually do have to stick their arms in these like specialized cages that allow the mosquitoes to feed. Absolutely crazy. I would never want to be in a lab that did that, but I mean, there is some amount of acceptable harm that can come to researchers depending on what you are studying. Oh, that's about echidnas? Gotcha. All right. With that being said, I am so happy to have gotten some actual work done. It's actually crazy. And I will probably see you all tomorrow when I do this again. I really do think that like per minute of work, I did manage to accomplish quite a lot. So do I have anything to plug? I think Cideray has an exciting surprise stream coming up this weekend. I don't know if that's set in stone yet, but well, go watch out for that. I'll go ahead and plug my fellow VThera members one more time. You can also find our links in the stream description if I remember to update that, but if I didn't, it's on every live video I've ever made, the links to our stuff. All right, I hope you all had a very productive work session, and I will see you later. Bye-bye, y'all.